Welcome, everyone, back to another BOLDcast podcast discussion thing. I'm Carson.
I'm Lindsay.
And this is our discussion for Avatar: Last Airbender, the entire series. I don't know how long this will be. We asked our patrons, as always, for questions. If you want to be a part of these in the future, make sure that you're on our Patreon or keeping an eye on our Patreon. Because we ask everybody whether it's a One Piece or other show podcast. But yeah, what'd you think of Avatar?
I really liked Avatar. I feel like throughout the series, it kind of, it started off as a very like week to week. They're like each episode has a new little adventure kind of thing, and then sort of really grew into like a very complete story towards the end. And I feel like that I kind of appreciated that. And I like that it kind of brought you along on that. And I liked it a lot. And it's obviously a kids show, but I think that there was a lot of really like important things in it, and it kind of clearly stood the test of time.
Yeah, for sure, it definitely did. And that's actually that's one of the questions that I want to get to. But first, let's do a lighter one, and we'll get the question from Orange on Patreon from Orange. Top 5 favorite characters.
Top 5 favorite characters. This is hard. Well, it's not that, because there's 5 like main characters, right?
Yeah.
I think I would say I guess just
what her name was. Her name Lynn? No.
That cool lady that had that cool creature. Yeah. She was number 1 in terms of coolness, but she's not my favorite because she wasn't really anything other than just cool. But I guess, I don't know, maybe I really like Zuko. Zuko might be my favorite just because I feel like he had a good journey, and I feel like his character arc was really believable in the way that he came around, and I really liked how he kind of went back on it a couple times. Like he seemed like, oh, he's a good guy now, and then he switched up again. And so I feel like that was compelling and interesting, but it didn't feel like in the story that was happening just for the sake of the plot. Like it didn't feel like, oh, he's fixed now, but we need more drama, so we're gonna like make him go back on himself, So it felt very believable. So he might be my top. I really like Toph. She's really funny, and just super cool and badass, and doesn't really care about what other people, and she just insults them all the time. So I like that. Aang is really good as well. Just in terms of a main character, he's really good. I feel like he gets that like happy-go-lucky thing, but similarly to Naruto, he does get down on himself sometimes, and the way that he struggles with being a good person, but also the guy who has to kill the Fire Lord essentially, and how he deals with that. And then obviously Katara is really good as well. I like all of them.
What about Azula? Is Azula in your top 5?
I don't think she's in my top 5. I hate, like, she's really good, but I just like she's so bad. Oh, actually, Iroh might be in my top 5.
Oh yeah, Iroh might be my favorite one. I think that Iroh, any moment with Iroh is like
it's automatically
one of the best moments, I think.
Yeah. Iroh might be actually in my top spot, and then Zuko, and Katara, or no, Iroh, Zuko, Toph, and Katara. But it's all very close. I think
it's all really close. I don't think there's bad characters.
No,
the thing, like even the Fire Lord, I think is a pretty interesting villain for as flat as he is, or as one dimensional. He actually has a lot to think about with him. Yeah. But yeah, Azula, as far as like Azula, I don't know. I guess we could talk about Azula. I don't think there was any questions weirdly about Azula. I think maybe.
And we didn't mention Sokka. Sokka's obviously really good as well, and I do really like him. He's like he would be really close. He'd be like a super close 6th place.
Yeah, Sokka's really good. I think what prevents him from being in like say a top 5 is just that he, other than in the episode with Suki, he doesn't have much of a journey. I guess.
Yeah.
Well, he kind of does. He does when he like takes the leadership role in the battle. But the struggle, because his struggle is kind of secondary, and I think they didn't want to overshadow Aang's like call to adventure type thing and call to leadership. It's his Sokka's is not as sort of overstated over the course of the entire show. Like he has
moments.
He has moments and he has struggles, but they're more self-contained to the arc that they're in, like the thing with Yue and becoming the leader and all the stuff with his dad. Like we had the Bato of the Water Tribe. It's not like it's not revisited a lot, but it's usually like, okay, we got Sokka's thing and now we're moving on type thing. Whereas a lot of, like, if you compare that to say Katara, there's a lot of the stuff going on with her that really feels like it drives the whole show.
Yes.
So yeah. But with Azula, a lot of people really love Azula, and I feel like a lot of people, I like Azula. I think that she's really badass and interesting, but I feel like a lot of people really overstate the complexity of her, and that maybe that's just me. I feel like that's a hot take because everyone always talks about how like Azula is super layered and interesting. I feel like in like multiple different, like I feel like there's a little bit of conflict, but she is I don't know, it's not really explored. Like it doesn't really have at least in the main show, there's some comics that explore it a little bit more, I think, but in the show, it's the conflict with her, the inner conflict is like she is very confident and she acts very confident. Her, it's reflected in her bending is like extremely strong, and you with bending and with fire bending as well, your hatred and your conviction kind of fuel it. So the fact that she has like a blue flame, this like ultra hot, super badass fire, is sort of emblematic of this confidence that she has. But she also, there's multiple times when she's looking into the campfire on the beach episode, and she's like talking about how her mom like thought that she was a monster, and then she makes a joke out of it. But it's clear that it's like 1% eating away at her, maybe deeper than she realizes. And then obviously when she starts hallucinating her mom, when she is going to become Fire Lord right before the last Agni Kai, there are things about her that are complex and interesting. But I feel like a lot of people overstate that because there's not really a resolution with it. It doesn't really go anywhere in the end. It's more of a crack that forms that they can use to like defeat her in the fight. But she has this second guess in her mind, and this inner conflict, but she doesn't end up confronting it in a really in like any way that has closure or anything. It's more like I said, a weakness that is exploited, and that leaves her open for Katara and Zuko to take her down. But so yeah, I feel like what to me leaves Azula out of like the top tier character that like a lot of people put Azula as their number one. Like she's like one of the most well written, whatever. I feel like it's a bit. I feel like people put a bit too much stock in her for that reason, because her arc, she's badass, she's interesting, she has some conflict, but it's not resolved in any way. Really, she's taken prisoner and then is off screen for the finale, and it's a time restraint issue because, like I said, in the comics it's explored a little bit more. But as far as the actual show goes, I feel like she is good, but not the best character like many make her out to be.
I
do
think
like,
as far as like a villain could go, like I think she is definitely interesting. She does what a lot of villains in kids TV specifically, but also just in all media, fail to do, and that's be actually intimidating near 100% of the time.
That's a strong point too. Like I guess I'm taking it from the other angle of a lot of people I feel like overrate her, but it's because the reason they do that is because the bar is so low for what she normally would be in another show. Is she because she actually does have depth, and she has some complexity to her, and she is intimidating.
Yes.
And smart, and and not dumb. It doesn't make like mistakes because she forgets something or something. she's a worthy opponent despite the fact that she only has firebending.
Mm-hmm.
She also, you know, has a lot of like martial arts skills as well. Like when she had no bending, she was able to escape and run faster than Aang somehow. Yeah, it's the so I'm kind of I'm being a little bit extra harsh on it, but it's more in response to the idea that she's like somehow incredible, but she is incredible. Like she is incredible, but she is incredible in relation to, say, like for the Fire Lord, the Father Lord.
Yeah, and I think she because of how confident, because of how actually good she is, they could have made her a lot flatter than she is.
Yeah.
But they didn't. So even the the amount of depth that she has, like you said, it might not be as deep as people want to think that it is, or maybe it is in the comics but not in what we've obviously seen of the show. But I do think that like that gives her a bit of it makes her feel like a real person, even if she's a terrible person.
Yeah.
She does feel realistic and in her evilness.
Mm-hmm.
And it does make it interesting to watch. And when she gets betrayed by her friends, she's like genuinely shocked because she, like, even though she wouldn't show them the same loyalty at all.
Yeah.
It's her overconfidence is her biggest flaw.
Yeah, and she
also
has
the reason to be confident. She's not just a bumbling idiot who's overconfident for no reason. She's one of the most powerful people in the show.
Yeah.
And she acts like it.
And she it's very interesting when she is so surprised and taken aback because she's so used to everybody being afraid of her that she didn't expect them to be more loyal to her friends than they are afraid of her. So yeah, it is interesting. She's got a lot of things going for her. I don't mean to like shit on her too much. But yeah, great stuff. What else? Azula's good.
Yeah. I think I really like her and I really appreciate her. Not in my top 5 though.
Same.
Probably definitely my number 1 like villain of the show though.
Speaking of betrayal and Azula and her gang, we have a question from Manessa Ferguson. What's your thoughts on Mai and Zuko? Remembered watching other reactions and people hated them. Personally, I think they're cool. What do you think of Mai and Zuko's relationship?
I think people's perspective on Mai and Zuko's relationship would come from how much they ship Katara and Zuko.
Right.
I think if I watched this show when I was a kid, I would have shipped Katara and Zuko. And I think that a lot of people probably do if they saw it when they were younger, because they're specifically girls, because they're like, oh, I'm like Katara.
Yeah.
And Zuko's really cool and like this damaged and broken bad boy kind of guy. And Aang is a literal child.
Yeah.
And acts like a child. So that's not like he's not like a guy that a kid would see maybe and be like, oh, I have such a huge crush on this bald child. It's like Caillou over here. But I think, I think the show makes it fairly obvious that like that ship is not really a thing. Like I think it from the outset of Aang and Katara kind of having a thing for each other, I think it's very clear to me. And so I think that Zuko and Mai are like, I think it's cute. I think that they kind of suit each other. I like that they kind of have this arc of like where they're both just being like depressed and like shitty, and like it's all like, oh, I'm like awesome Fire Lord guy, and she's just kind of like going along with that. And I feel like I like how she, like, it was all just very like, oh yeah, we're miserable together kind of thing. But I like that they really did care about each other, and she like saved everyone's life later on and stuff. Like I feel like it had a good journey. I feel like at first I was kind of like, oh, like, I don't know if this is gonna last very long, kind of thing, or like, oh, did you just put them together because they're both kind of emo?
Yeah, I think they did, but
I think it worked, and I think that they we're then able to be emo together later on, but more happily.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that the journey of like how she is inspired and like because she's such an uninspired person and she's so like dead, and then Zuko is kind of feeling that energy, but then when he makes a stand for something he believes in and like against her, she actually respects him more, and then it inspires her to make like a positive change too. And yeah, I think that's a really good, powerful arc to their relationship because it's rocky and it's not a love triangle, like it's not like this romance that's based on their, I don't know, it's more it feels more realistic because it's almost like he went off to pursue his dream and she wanted to stay home, and then he inspired her to go pursue her dream, and then they like linked up later. Like it's more of that kind of a thing. And I feel like that kind of an arc for a romance is a lot better. And yeah, I think you're right about people mostly just caring about the Zutara ship. And I don't know, like there were comments that were like, "Oh, I don't think Zutara is actually that serious." I think it's like incredibly serious from what I know. It's like a huge thing in the fan base.
Very early on that would be a big ship, and then from friends that I know that have watched the show are like, "Oh yeah, like I definitely like when I watched that as a kid, like I shipped that."
And I think they kind of set it up with the Jet thing as well, where she likes Jet, so it sets up
Jet
this precedent
similar
that
to
she
Zuko.
likes a bad boy type thing, and who's like really cool and a leader and stuff. So I think that's pretty obvious that a lot of people would like that. And I think it is kind of a more serious ship.
Katara and Zuko just seem more similar in terms of like their maturity and their age, because Aang is a bit younger and he does act like it,
Yeah. Oh, this is kind of an interesting one. It's more of a prediction question, but Vlee says, "I'm curious as to what other forms of bending Lindsay has thought there might be. We have the core 4 and many offshoots, healing capabilities for water, metal bending, all such fun ideas, branches for bending. What else could be on the horizon? Like what other theories do you have? Because like you had theories about metal bending from very early on. You're like, why can't they bend metal? It's pretty much just rocks." And then it happened, and then so I think people want to see if you'll guess anything that is on the horizon for bending.
I guess it's hard to like think of anything because I feel like I was really mad when they couldn't bend metal at first. I was like kind of annoyed about that. And also like I really liked the bloodbending episode because I don't know if I talked about it much before that, but I was also kind of annoyed that you couldn't manipulate water in things that had a high concentration of water. Like I was kind of just like, there's water in the air, like where do the boundaries end? Like, okay, you have mud that's like half water, half earth. Can you not filter it out by, you know what I mean? Like
she can. Yeah, we saw her do
I know
that.
she can, but like earlier on, before we got more into that kind of thing. I feel like that's like a good way because I think that not being able to do that first is like a good because none of them are at the power level to be able to do that yet. But it's also kind of frustrating as the audience being like, you should.
I think it's only frustrating if they're in a situation to be able to do something like that would save them, and then they don't do it. Yeah. But they usually do. Is the thing is like so they drop the water, and then they're like, "Oh, we spilled the water. We're fucked in the desert." And then Katara just like picks up the water, stuff like that, or it gets she pulls water out of like a cloth or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then sweat bending. That's later. Yeah. That's in book 3. But yeah, I think that it. That's I think honestly I think what if you can't think of anything, I think what's fun about that question is just that the show is really good at like because it's anything with a really simple concept for a power system like that, it gets the audience's mind going in a really easy way. Like it's easy to start coming up with ways that you could use it, like because it's like if somebody can fly, it's like, oh yeah, if I could fly, I do this, I do that. But if somebody's like, oh, I can create fire with my hands, then it's like, oh, then you could, I don't know, maybe you could do like you make maybe if there are a bunch of people who could do that, they could have an industrial revolution a lot faster than other people because they can create energy just with their body like that and use it for machinery and things. And then of course the Fire Nation does that basically. Mm-hmm. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think like most things that I could think of, I could just assign them to, like I could just be like, oh, you could like bend this or bend that. Like the only thing that like would be different would be like being able to bend like plants to be able to grow faster or something, like life bending kind of, or like causing someone to age, or like or like I don't like time bending. Like those are the only things that I could like think of that wouldn't potentially fall into a category. But then again, like making plants grow faster could be water bending if you could manipulate the
flow
of, or like I mean like light and dark bending. I don't know, like you know what I mean, like I because like light, like fire is pretty, they're powered by the sun, like that's pretty close to light, and like unless you had like shadow bending, but like shadows don't seem to be like an element in that world as they are in other fantasy worlds, for example.
Right well, yeah, it's that's one of the best parts about like exploring the bending, is that it's very well thought out. And you know, from the movements, obviously the choreography, that's a big thing, but just how it's applied is always so interesting. And I feel like that's like, there's questions about like what makes the show so timeless. Actually, I'll ask that one now. Let me just find it. Oh yeah, it's from this question from Devil Please. It's a really long question, but it's talking about, you know, there's going to be new Avatar projects on the horizon. There was just the new live action show and stuff like that. And they're working on 3 new projects. And the question in the middle is, what do you guys think is the appeal for the show that gives it such longevity after such a long time?
I think what's really good about it is, I feel like it's hard to explain what is so good about it. I think that it's simple. I think that it like builds like throughout like the 3 books. I feel like it built on itself. I feel like the fact that it has a really strong conclusion is like a huge thing, because things that have a good ending, you're more likely to remember them and want to come back to them as being a fulfilling and satisfying experience, rather than, oh, if the show's really, really good and then the ending, it doesn't really end, or it like cut off at a weird point, then you might be like, like I don't want to revisit that because it's not as complete, you know, in your mind. But I also think just something about the characters, something about like the humor, like the way that it manages to be a children's show that is fully for children, but is still enjoyable by like adults, and not just adults that watched it when they were kids and still love it, you know? Like I imagine when it was coming out, if you were a parent watching TV with your kids, you'd be much more engaged with watching Avatar rather than like, I can't think of another like crummy kids TV show or something. You know what I mean? Like I think there are a lot of good things about the show that have kind of led to its like that have led to it sticking around for so long. Because even before we watched it, like I feel like I always kind of heard about it. Like I just never went to watch it, but it was always like I would hear people talk about it, or like I knew it was kind of like a fan favorite, but I kind of thought like, oh, kind of just missed it. Like that, you know, there was a lot of shows that I didn't watch when I was a kid, and I thought it was kind of one of those like, oh, you had to be there for this show,
right?
But I think after watching it, I think that there's a lot of things that would make people, first of all, go back and revisit it if they, you know, grew up with it and then wanted to check it out again. I feel like it would be a show that wouldn't disappoint you. Like I think there's a lot of shows that you might watch as a kid and be like, oh man, I loved that show. Like I remember whatever, like I would watch like Johnny Test sometimes when I was a kid, and I remember really liking it at the time. But I think if I watched it now, I would be like, this is just some shitty kids show, you know?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be like, wow, this is a masterful storytelling that really is surprising how good it is, you know?
Yeah.
And I think also, you know, just having the like all of the main characters are very different, and I think having you know, like there's good humor. It's not all just like gross like bathroom humor as is in a lot of kids TV shows. I think that there's like a lot of good, you know, topics. There's a lot of things that are still relevant. There's not really a lot in it that I think aged poorly, or you're like, there's not a lot of moments where you're like, oh, like,
right,
you know, that's really early 2000s. You know, you wouldn't say that nowadays, you know.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of blind jokes about Toph, but it comes across as very like well-natured, or like you know, it doesn't come across as like they're being super ableist and they hate blind people, you know, because she's presented as being super badass and cool, and like you know, it doesn't even matter that she can't see.
It's the kind of jokes that like if you were blind you would probably laugh at too, because they're just simple, and like and also the jokes usually make fun of the other people. It's like when Toph's like, there it is, and then they all look, and then they all forget she's blind. That's what it's gonna sound like when you see it. And then just like, Toph, are you sure you don't want to come to the library? I don't see the point. Like, or well, yeah, shit like that, or when they're or just chill. And then there are other jokes where when she puts the poster on backwards, and then she's just like, but she realizes that she probably did that first, so they don't call her out on it. It's like the jokes are funny, and it's because they're crafted to not like make fun of Toph, really. It's or it's Toph making fun of herself, or other people, and like making a fool out of them for forgetting that she's blind, and like, you know, or they're walking in the desert and then Toph bumps into Sokka. Can you watch where you're going? No, I can't. Oh, sorry. Like shit like that. That's like one of my favorite parts of the show. And yeah, it's the humor potentially is one of the things that really keeps it good. And it's like bar for bar Star Wars, pretty much. Like the template of the plot and the story is pretty much Star Wars. And but it's in this in the font of like an Eastern style story, which especially for the 2000s as a kid, and in Western TV in general, it's not usually that strongly, like, you know, a lot of those, it's the same reason why a lot of Western people really are, you know, really in love with Ghibli films, is because it feels so alien. It feels like just the aesthetic and the style and the way that things are presented, not even just visually, but just like the way that people talk and think about things from an Eastern philosophy, Eastern perspective. It's so different from all the other things that we have that it has this general mystique about it that other things just don't have. So that's an alluring factor as well. It just feels unique.
I think also something else is I think that just by the nature of it, it feels like the bar is very low to entry
100%.
to be a part of the like fan base of this show. Like it's
that's not what I thought you were gonna say, but that's also true.
You know, like either you watched it as a kid, and I feel like it's the kind of thing, like I feel like a lot of people watch Scooby-Doo as a kid, but now, and they say that they like Scooby-Doo, but like do they remember like most of what happened in Scooby-Doo? Probably not. They might dress up as the characters for Halloween because they like the visual memory of these characters, or they like the idea of the show the way it is in their memory more than they might like the actual show itself. Meanwhile, I feel like something like Avatar, I feel like people that like it for the entirety of what it was. They're not just like, oh, I think Aang has a cool design, so I like him and will say that I like the show, you know? I think that like you just have to watch the show, and like you could read the comics, you know, you can go on and watch Korra. There are more things that you can do to get more into it, but because it is such a complete like 3-season show, and it's like you could watch it and be done and still feel very attached to the characters and very involved in the story. And I think that like I think these days, especially online, it can seem like getting into the fan base of something could be extremely difficult. Like you could be like, oh, like I don't know as much about Star Wars because I only watched like the first ones, and now there's like 50 more plus like all these like animated series plus all of like this and that. Or like getting into Marvel, you're like, oh my god, like there's like 1,000,000
or
things.
One Piece or Naruto.
You know, like the barrier to entry, or like it can seem quite intimidating to get into a lot of media these days, when it just seems like you're swamped, like with streaming, how there's just like unlimited options available and they have so many episodes, you know. I think that the fact that it is a bit shorter also definitely helps.
Yeah, 100%. It's I think that's a big deal, that it's not intimidating to get into.
And there's nothing about it, because it's a kids show as well, but like there's nothing about it that makes you feel dumb and like you don't get it. Whereas like, you know, some shows you might be like, oh, like I feel like this is going over my head, or like, you know what I mean? Like people who like it think that they're smarter than other people because they like this like mysterious.
Yeah, it's not
show.
like there's not some sort of meta thing about it that and with some things it's good on its own, and then the extra stuff elevates it, and I think that that's the case with this, but it's not like, oh, you only really understand it once you get to the end and then think about everything that came to pass in like a completely different light, and then it becomes good. It's only good in the context of what comes later, not, you know, the moment to moment. And like that's a big problem. I think that's a big problem in anime these days, especially, is that a lot of people who are big fans of whatever series, and I'm not just talking about One Piece, but I think it's a big problem in something like One Piece with a lot of episodes, but it's a big problem in other way shorter 1 season long shows, something like Solo Leveling or other things. It's not that every moment is so cool. People binge a whole thing, get to the big moment, fall in love with 10 seconds out of hours of stuff, and then are like, this whole thing is a masterpiece. And it's like, yeah, you know, maybe there was a lot of build-up towards that moment across the 50 episodes or 100 plus episodes, but in reality, the build-up happened in like 10 episodes before that moment, and you're just kind of like in the rhythm of this show or in the rhythm of this thing, or you just kind of like love this one little thing. But just because one moment is good doesn't mean the entire thing is good. It just means that one moment was good, and then they recommend it based on that moment. And they, you know, a lot of people are maybe younger, and but in the case of Avatar, every moment is good.
Yes.
Like everything is good. There are some things that are better than others, but like everything is worth watching.
Yeah.
Like there are 2 or 3 episodes that are probably like I skipped in my first watch, and I feel like after watching them, I could, you know, it's not that big of a deal, those episodes in particular.
They weren't as egregious as like, you know, filler episodes in other shows might be, but they, you know, they weren't at, but like.
But my point is like, you know, I don't love Avatar just because of the Ozai versus Aang fight. You know, I don't love it just because of the last Agni Kai. The whole show was not building up to, it's not like, you know, how I talked about when we watched Naruto. It's like, I really wanted to watch Naruto because of a lot of good moments, but I wanted to show you Naruto so that we could get to Madara versus the Shinobi Alliance, because that was my favorite part of the whole show. And, you know, there's many other big peaks and valleys.
Yeah.
And there's that in Avatar too, but the valleys are so much higher than the valleys in other shows. And I think that's probably the main thing that keeps it good. And it has to be because of, you know, because of Nickelodeon, because of when it aired, and it has this, you know, it's similar to something like a Cowboy Bebop, which, you know, was really popular when it was airing because it has a similar kind of structure to Avatar, as far as the episode to episode and serialization of it. You don't just love Avatar for a moment or for the finale or for the big fight. You love it for everything up to it, almost as much or more.
I think as well, like. Yeah, I feel like it's almost like, this is obviously a very different show, but I feel like it's almost kind of a similar thing with Game of Thrones. Obviously, like the ending of that wasn't the same thing, but I think what made people like Game of Thrones so much is not because necessarily they love shows about the content of Game of Thrones. It was because the quality and like the episode to episode was so much better.
Conversation to conversation.
Yeah, moment to moment was so much better than almost every other show at the time and even to this day.
Yeah.
That it, you know, it stays with you, and you think about it, and you can't wait to see what happens next because it's so good, and you're not just like, oh, that one kind of sucked, I guess you know what I mean? Like I think it's like the consistency and the elevation through obviously Game of Thrones, and you can see the difference between Avatar and Game of Thrones. Like these are not comparable shows in terms of like
Netflix thinks they are.
Yeah. But like Avatar had a fantastic ending. Avatar, however many years later, like over 10 years later, still very popular, getting reboots, getting all kinds of stuff. Game of Thrones, I feel like had such a cult following and people still like it, but it kind of fell off incredibly after the last season when they messed everything up. Like
the
last few seasons, but specific, like for most people, the last season was like, you know, this show might not even be worth rewatching anymore.
Yeah.
And now it's time to, you know, I'll pick something else that's similar. And you know, now they're making like House of the Dragon and this and that, but it's just, you know what I mean? Like I feel
Game of Thrones is a good illustration of what I was talking about, the peaks and valleys and the moment to moment, like we're talking about, is because early Game of Thrones, first 4 seasons are like, they're like that. It's like everything, and that's like my bar for like a 10 out of 10 for me is when not only are the big moments big, but everything in between feels almost as good. And that's what you get with the early Game of Thrones. But then you can clearly tell once they were going literally off book, because they couldn't go on book because George didn't finish the fucking books. Love George, by the way. But it's, you know, it's clear. I think if the books were out, it would have been a different show. However, with what they chose to do, they couldn't keep up that moment to moment. Then all they were doing was trying to write these big moments, these big crescendos. Everything became about Hardhome and Battle of the Bastards and fucking everything. You know,
big
like the loot train and they revealed the thing about Jon Snow twice or 3 times, like, and it was a big moment every time, and it's like, okay, like I feel like we already did this, but you're doing the next season's like mid-season finale or season finale or something about the same reveal that we got twice already. Like I don't know what the hell this is about. But it's a difference in philosophy. This isn't a Game of Thrones review, obviously, but if you think about those two different sides of the coin of the same show, that's the difference between. I mean, there's plenty of things. Further you get deeper into the later Game of Thrones, there are plenty more problems, and they start to crop out a lot more. But it's because they don't have the foundation constantly being reinforced of every scene, every moment has that gravitas. It has that like peak to it. And that's what Avatar is, and that's really what sets it apart. That's the same thing that sets apart something like Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, and why Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood was so high. Why Frieren is, I think, still number 1 on my anime list. It's the same shit. It's because Frieren has that same thing. It's not just, you know, Frieren versus whoever, herself. Like, it's not just those big battles. It's everything in between. Every scene is really good if you really love it. A lot of people thought it was boring. And I don't agree, but it's because to me it has that same feeling to it. It's like everything that happens is important and good and matters and is awesome, and it's the same thing with Avatar.
And I think what's really impressive with Avatar is that they're able to have that feeling for like a week to week like kids show.
Exactly,
you know? And that's what makes it so impressive.
And not since. No, I don't like. And we haven't seen Steven Universe. A lot of people claim that it's like similar, as hitting the same notes. You know, I can't speak to that, but I don't think there's been a Western show of like a Western kids show that has actually achieved that. I think that a lot of people who like the shows like Adventure Time, regular show, maybe a regular show I think is more comedy, but Steven Universe, that kind of stuff. Like I feel like because they're more comedic, like they're more comedy even than Avatar, and Avatar is very comedic. It can achieve that kind of similar thing. And it's the same reason why a lot of people like something like Bob's Burgers or fucking, you know, whatever. Like, that's why a lot of comedy shows and why comedy is so, has a way greater market share here in the West than it does in Japan or in the East, is because the people get that moment to moment a lot more when they can laugh at it.
Yeah. That makes sense.
You know, so But that's also I think what gives Avatar that staying power is because it does tap into that format of being mostly adventure comedy series. Yeah, there's a lot more that we didn't even talk about that give it that longevity, that staying power, but it's really just that it's unique and it feels unique. Even though, like I said, what's interesting about it is that it's not that unique. Like, you know, it's for all. I saw a video essay. I forget what channel did it. Maybe somebody else has seen it. So it was a big video like a year or two ago or something. But it was a video essay about how Kung Fu Panda is so popular in all over the world, like especially in China and in the East and stuff like that. It's hugely popular everywhere because it has like a global appeal because of its like art style and its whole thing. And we think of it here as like so different, but it's not. It's a video essay was putting forward that it was like, it's not an Eastern story. It's a Western hero's journey, but with the aesthetic of this Asian art style. And or, you know, it's still an American art style, but with the, you know, the aesthetic. And I think Avatar is the exact same. I don't know if Avatar is even as popular overseas. I tried many times to look. I wanted to see what like if there were any Korean reactors or Japanese reactors who had watched Avatar, done reactions to it. I wanted to see what their perspective was on it or what they thought of it. But I couldn't really find very much. But my point is, it's going back to what I was saying. It's that it's a Western style story. It's a Western, like the way that Aang like grows in power and stuff like that. It's different in a lot of ways, in a lot of real ways. The fact that in a lot of ways, but then something like a more traditional, like a Star Wars or like Kung Fu Panda or whatever. It's different in a lot of ways that really matter. But it's still familiar to us. And it has, like I said, this mystique, this different energy to it because of all of the influences of Eastern philosophy and Eastern animation and stuff like that. And speaking about that, I think that there are questions about the animation. Maybe they're not. Maybe I think it was maybe Monkey D. Lucy's that I'm thinking about. But the show feels more like an anime now that I've seen a lot more anime than it did when I watched it for the first time. Like, I expect, you know, my image of it was like a American show trying to be an anime, and if you know anime, you can see through it, and I think that's still mostly true, but it's way closer than I gave it credit for. The animation is way more in that vein than I thought.
Do you think it's because like the art style is like not so like anime, or like what you might have thought was like like, you know, with the very like angular faces and like anime type eyes and stuff, like, you know, that it doesn't have the same look, but then it has like the same like movement kind of look, maybe?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is it was outsourced. Most of the animation was outsourced to Korea, and one of the creators, there was the two guys, Brian and Mike, one of them, I forget which one, they went to Korea and oversaw the animation for a lot of the show's run, and so it's, and the same places that they were outsourcing to were the similar places that were doing a lot of anime at the time and still do get outsourced to a lot. So it you know, it feels authentically, you know, it's made by similar or the same, you know, it's in that same sort of framework, but yeah, I think it's when they start to move, but it's the storyboarding. It's like it's on a production level that keeps it feeling very American. I can't put my finger on exactly what, but there are some times where it feels very much like an anime, but there's a lot of times, even in those moments, where it's like the way that they're moving, the way that they're like composite on the background, the way the angles, everything, something about it in here, it feels less like an anime and more like anime inspired. And I feel like a lot of people probably know what I'm talking about if you like really look and analyze it, that type of thing. I still wouldn't call it an anime, but I think that, you know, it's a lot closer than I gave it credit to before this rewatch. I thought, like, you know, not nearly that close, but after rewatching and really putting a critical eye to it on my whatever 8th or 10th rewatch or something, whatever this is. It surprised me with how fluid it was, especially earlier on in the show. I thought because later on in the show you start to get a lot more fluid, big set piece fights and stuff like that. Once Azula starts, busts onto the scene and stuff. But yeah, very good. Anyway, another question. There's a lot of questions about the finale because we didn't do podcasts in between for the show, and we planned to, but we didn't end up doing it. What culture or character from the series do you wish we got more exploration on? That's a good one.
I don't know. I feel like I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know. Like I feel like we got like a decent amount of a lot of them. Like there's things like the swamp people that was kind of cool and just like different and like weird. I think it where like at the very start when we're in the southern are we in the southern water tribe? I feel like we didn't get a lot of that, but obviously because they had been like they weren't really in a state of their normal like prosperity. They were just kind of like struggling to get by after everyone left, and they're it's like all the women and children kind of stayed behind. So like I think like it would have been interesting to see like what they would have been like, because then we go to the northern water temple and they have like this crazy city, and they're they have all these like basically like schools of like teaching, and then the women learn healing over here and this and that over there. But what I would be really interested to see, potentially in Korra or like in the future, would be more about like if they can like rebuild the like air nomad kind of thing. Like if there's a way to like I don't know how people like get like if Aang has a kid, like can anyone like what I mean? Like I don't really know how that works, because also for like 90% of the show when we saw anyone that was an airbender, they were all men.
As far as we knew, there were a bunch of kids, but they weren't. They seemed like they were boys, but you don't really know.
You can't tell. But all of the like older
all
people,
the elders were all dudes, and then later we see the avatar, the previous airbending avatar, who was a woman, and she had like half.
So
her
I guess
I think there were statues as well that had long hair too.
So I guess one thing that I would be curious about is like how. Like, we kind of saw, like, Aang getting trained up and stuff, but, like, I'd be interested to know, like, how their normal people were, because as we saw in the Fire Nation, the Earth Nation, and both of the Water Tribes...
Plenty of people were non-benders.
Were non-benders, and they still had a place within society. But just by nature of, like, the way that the air temples were constructed, and also they're nomads, so they move around. So I guess I'd just be interested of, like, a normal non-bender... you know what I mean? Like how their life would kind of be like.
Yeah. I'd be interested in that too. So their culture, basically. Yeah. I feel like that's the only one that was really unexplored. I feel like maybe there'd be more with the Earth Kingdom, but we spent most of the series in the Earth Kingdom. Yeah. So. And I feel like you can kind of imagine it, and like based on what we've seen, you can get a pretty good idea. Yeah, and a lot of the cultures are very homogenous. Like the Fire Nation was obviously very homogenous because it was under like a very strict sort of system, being the Fire Nation, and then the Earth Kingdom was very spread out. So there were a few different pockets of different people. And there was also the people who were like worshiping the guy who Kyoshi killed. And Kyoshi and the Kyoshi warriors, that's a completely different place, and that's in the Earth Kingdom. Cool. Yeah. Anyway, there's a bunch of little pockets, but I feel like we were pretty. I feel pretty satiated on exploring all that stuff. But again, I need to reiterate this every time that we talk about world building, is that I think that world building is extremely overrated as far as storytelling. Sometimes less is more. Most of the time, less is more. I feel like a lot of people get attached to the details and their mind runs wild, but what they don't understand is that your mind running wild as a result of the few details is not there's so much beneath the surface. I want to figure it out, I need to know all of it. That is a tactic to get you attached to the story, and that's all world building is supposed to do. It's not a real world as much as you'd want it to be. So once you kind of like pull back the curtain, you realize nothing's there. It's just it's an illusion. It's all a magic trick. And I feel like a lot of people who are really into world building kind of forget that, and they because they want it to feel really real. But as far as in the show, I feel like as far as out of the show, there's obviously a lot more exploration that's going to be happening in Korra. So I know all of the stuff that happens in that as well, and I think that you're going to be pleasantly surprised with a lot of the world building that goes on in that. But as far as the show as we got it, I feel like spending more time learning about the different cultures and stuff like that would have been super boring.
Yeah. I don't feel like I wanted anything more out of
that
the
question
show.
was Black Snow, by the way. Sorry.
But yeah, I think there are some things to potentially explore going forward.
Never mind. That question was not from Black Snow. That question was from David Butt. Sorry. But the part of the question was also characters. Any other characters you wanted to see explored more? I feel like we kind of covered that with the really cool girl. Whatever her name was.
She was cool. I don't know if she would have gotten less cool if we knew more about her. I think characters. I feel like I don't have any complaints.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I would have really liked was what's her name? Yue Sokka's
yes.
girlfriend.
Oh, true.
I think,
that was
like,
crushed
that,
a big time.
And it wasn't just her as a character. It was that entire storyline was severely rushed. And I think like if I could change one thing from the entire show, it would be to give a little bit more time to that and make that relationship more believable.
And Katara's training and Aang's training.
Yes.
More exploration of
more
that. Exploration
of that, but specifically because the moon and like the way that throughout the rest of the series Sokka
is
like held onto that so much, I feel like I got more attached to it the farther away we got from it, weirdly. Yeah. But it was because it was so like it was kind of unbelievable in the moment that they're so attached to each other after they saw each other one time. You know what I mean? Like that if I had to pick like my one complaint for the show, that would definitely be it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I actually agree with that too. For Nina asks, of the past avatars introduced in the series, which one would you most like to see a show of their own?
None. I don't like it's.
I was gonna say the same thing.
It's similar to what we were just talking about with world building. I think that less is more. I think in Naruto, which was my first anime that we were watching on this channel, that show proved to me that I do not like it when we get too much backstory.
Over exposition.
We get when we get things from people that are supposed to be like I don't know, like legendary.
It's like, an example of something.
Yes, I do not want backstory. I feel like, and I feel like that I like throughout Avatar we got a lot from the most recent guy, like not like 20 avatars back.
Yeah,
you know,
Roku
like,
was
Roku
sort of
was relevant, and he was tied into what was going on in the story with the Fire Nation and everything. Like I think we got just enough of him. Like I think if we saw more of him, I would have been annoyed.
Yeah,
I liked that.
And we got a lot of him in his
We got
episode.
a lot of him, and I like that, and I think like Kyoshi as well. Like she was really cool. I don't want any more of her.
Yeah, we got more of her than we needed, and I feel like it was still good. And
yeah.
That's a sweet spot that I feel like a lot of people like. It's an innocent question to ask, and it makes a lot of sense but again, it's the point of stuff like that is to make you want more. It's not so like getting more doesn't actually fulfill that, like, oh my God, I want more. Mm-hmm. Once you get more, it's not good anymore. Like the wanting more is what makes you want more. Yeah. It keeps you coming back. But if you're, the problem is like you want more, and then you end up in a Star Wars situation where it's just like, this is not good anymore. Like this is boring now. Or a Marvel movie situation mm-hmm. where it's just like, okay, Infinity War and Endgame were good. Yeah. All the shit that built up to that were good, but you getting more doesn't make it better.
Mhm.
You know, it usually like less is more is important. So yeah, like Kyoshi being a badass avatar in the past, I don't want to know about her boyfriend that she broke up with when she was a teenager, when she learned that she was the avatar or whatever fucking shit. And there's comics about her, about like her life and stuff like that. She is a symbol of brutality and strength and overwhelming power. And she like she's supposed to be the Earth avatar. That's because there's Roku, who is a fire avatar, who's an like the point of Roku is he's an example of someone from the Fire Nation early on who's really powerful but is not the Fire Lord. He's really powerful and he's a good guy to show us there's an interplay here with people from the Fire Nation. They're not all evil. There's a guy in Aang who is from the place where the Fire Lord is, like that's important theming for the story, because a big part of the story is the fact that not everyone in the Fire Nation is evil. It's kind of unraveling that. We get multiple examples of that. So that's Roku. That's the point of Roku, or that's one of the points of Roku, being a fire dude. If you strip away all of everything, everything we know about the series, if you think about them sitting down to draft what the story is going to be, the idea of Aang having like a little bit of the evil in him, like that he's a firebender also, that he has a firebending person who came before him. And that's kind of weird, like what do we think of that? And then you learn, he's a pretty good guy, and that adds to the whole shit. Kyoshi in the same way, although I really like Kyoshi and she's super fucking cool, she's like earthbending stone. She's tough. She's
I think what I like about it is like
she stands tall.
We learn about all the stuff that she did, and it's like, damn, she was intense.
Yeah.
And then we actually see her, like, I can't remember, like once or twice, and it's like the stories are 100% true. I don't need to see any more. It's confirmed. Like, I think if you. Yeah. Anyway,
it's like I feel like, because where do you like say I haven't read the comics, but there are two things you could do. You can make her, if there's a story focused on her, make an attendant of hers or a student of hers the main character, and then it's all about looking at this crazy person that's like super cool. Do that, or you make it from her perspective. For example, and this goes for all avatars that were maybe cool in the past. It's like you tell it from her perspective, and then it ruins what was cool about her from Aang's perspective. Because from Aang's perspective, she's a symbol of strength and uncompromising strength. She's steadfast in her ideals. You cannot convince her otherwise. She will continue to stay where she is and do what she needs to do. And if you get in her way, you are going to get rolled over. That's the point of Kyoshi, and she's powerful enough to do it. But she has no malice. It's this sort of like time, and that's why she's like over 200 years old or something. Like she is timeless, and she is like nature, uncaring, or like the earth, uncaring about everything else that goes on. That as a symbol is what Kyoshi is. Kyoshi is not a complex, layered I feel like and I feel like this gets to the heart, all the stuff about world building, about overexposing of characters. It gets to the heart about these instincts that creative people have, and writers in particular have, and fans of stuff that like want all this stuff. It's like this overconsumption, this want of more, and this want this idea that necessarily every character needs to be deep and layered and complex and blah, they have multiple sides to them, and they need to have contradictions and inner conflict, and it's like not everything serves that same purpose. I think it's better in a world where there's less flat characters for sure, but Kyoshi doesn't need to be this multi-layered, complex thing that needs to be explored in order, so I feel like we get these types of questions a lot, and I feel like we have a different perspective on it. That's why we always go so hard on stuff like this, and it's not a reflection on the person who asked the question. It's just like I feel like it feels so normal these days, you know? It feels so normal to like want more of whatever it is. Or like, oh, I wish we got more of this. It's like, do we really need more of whatever that was? Like,
Yeah.
I feel like we don't. I feel like like Avatar was good because it was a little bit more surface level in the places where it was, and a little bit deeper in the ways that it was.
What helped it be good.
Yeah. Dub. Okay. There's a question from Nikolai about how the show would be different if it was made today, and I feel like we kind of got that question answered with the live action, which we haven't seen, but from what everybody said, it's like, you know, we could see what it would be like if it were made today. This is I just want to hear what you think about this. Maybe this won't go anywhere, but from Arvin C, do you guys have any parallel fights from other anime TV series that are liked by you both, which mirror Zuko versus Azula? An example of comparison would be the fights that have similar sad story backed by excellent choice of music and animation. Is there anything that sticks out to you like that like any big set pieces that kind of wowed you like that? And if not, does that say something about Zuko versus Azula?
Yeah, I can't. It's hard because I feel like in a lot of shows the fights are not my favorite part. And they don't strike me in the way that I think that they do for a lot of people. I still like, anime fights. They're fun and stuff. I think like there's some stuff in Hunter x Hunter that comes. Is like as emotionally you're that emotionally. I mean, for some people, maybe they would say like Naruto versus Sasuke kind of fights.
I'm surprised you don't say that. I think you need to rewatch that fight. Though both of those fights are the best fights ever.
I think that I do like those fights, but for me, I think I've like Azula versus Zuko. I don't know. Like, there's something about that, and then something about a lot of fights in Hunter x Hunter. Like, I think
about the volleyball match in Hunter x Hunter,
yeah.
Hisoka versus Gon. I think about Crollo versus Zoldix. Think about Uvo versus Kurapika, Meruem versus Netero.
Yeah. Gon versus Pito, almost every fight in the final,
even non-fights, Gon charging his shit against Morel.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Like that to me, that's Hunter x Hunter is something that I put, one of the few things I put on the same level as Avatar.
Yeah,
and for very similar reasons. It's parallel in a lot of ways.
If you liked Avatar and you haven't seen Hunter x Hunter.
Yeah,
honestly, that's quite a good recommendation.
It's really good, yeah.
And even in the way that it starts out a little bit more lighter, actually I feel like that's a good adult
100%
recommendation for a similar show.
100%. Yeah, I agree. Very good. And stuff, pretty much everything in Hunter x Hunter.
Yeah, maybe I don't know. I think I do. Yeah, other than in Hunter x Hunter, I'm struggling to, and I mean there might be some that I'm just
bunch in Naruto. In One Piece, what's one in One Piece that would be up there? Nothing happened for me, almost. But again, it's less of a fight. It's like a moment. It's a moment.
I think I like a lot of stuff in One Piece. I don't think that the fights are not the standout part to me of that show and what makes me love it.
I think they will be. Eventually. I think that eventually it will get to a crazy level, but
I'm sure that there's other shows that I'm not thinking of that have good fights, but I like that one, the music, everything about it, the way that it was intercut with everything else, it felt grand and explosive, and it was the
felt the culmination of his journey.
It was very emotional.
And him using the other bending styles.
Yeah,
in
what I really liked about it is that he was
centered and calm,
and he wasn't, and because he was kind of the bad guy that already turned good, he wasn't the good guy trying to beat some sense into the bad guy. He wasn't trying to be Azula, you need to be good like me. He was just proving. Yeah, that was better than
goes
her.
Back to Iroh. It's just what, you think I should save my sister? No, I think she's evil. She needs to be put down.
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
But I think that's something that kind of sets it apart in a way.
Yeah, there's a lot of small things like that in the perspective of the show that are really good. Yeah, I mean, the point of all this is that Last Agni Kai and like the final battles were incredible. Like they're like, I was saying Naruto versus Sasuke 1 or 2 are like maybe 2, but 1 it's arguable. They have things about them that probably put them next to each other. For me, is the best fight in animation for me, because it has the perfect buildup over like hundreds of episodes, and it all feels like it's leading towards it. There's like zigs and zags, and there's so much going into it, and then just the details in the animation, especially in the second one, are like incredible, and the silence and everything is so good. But I'd say that these two fights are put up there as well for sure. Like on that same tier, where Aang versus Ozai to me feels so perfectly set up that it's ridiculous.
I think something for me with Zuko versus Azula, I think maybe where the Naruto versus Sasuke doesn't hit as hard for me is because I didn't really like or respect Sasuke as like a person or a villain in the story, whereas Azula, I didn't like her, I hated her, but I respected her, and like as a villain, like I felt like she would, you know what I mean? Like yeah, and maybe I would feel different if I rewatched Naruto. As I've said many times, I feel like I need to rewatch it to actually appreciate it properly.
Yeah. Oh, another I don't want to spoil.
Yeah, don't.
Okay, yeah, since we're talking about the thing about like the finale and everything in kind now, there's two questions. Questions from KC. Anything you would have changed about the finale and or the show in general? We'll start with that, and then I'll get to the next one because the other one's more leading.
As I already said, not really, other than the storyline with Sokka and Uwe.
No, but the finale.
About the finale? No, I don't think I would have changed anything. I thought it said and the show in general.
Oh, yeah, I guess they did. But
about the finale, no, not really.
Okay, and then the next question is from Luke Valentine. Thoughts on the show's romance? Were you invested? Do you think it was handled well? We kind of talked about that with... I guess we could let's talk about that for Katara and Aang. How do you think their romance was handled?
I think that it I think it was handled well. I think it was cute. I think it was always kind of like being hinted at and growing over time.
Yeah. I mean, there's a secret tunnel where they maybe kissed.
I think that it was handled well. It was just sweet and cute, and it wasn't too overdone. I liked that it wasn't the thing of like the girl just rejecting the guy the entire time, but then he gets her in the end.
Yeah.
Like Katara wasn't just like, ew, get away from me, you dirty, gross person.
I think it was handled in a really interesting way because romance, from a guy's perspective, like in a hero's journey type thing, the girl is usually something to be won, right? And it didn't feel like that, but it still felt satisfying and like a reward, like a cherry on top of the ending of doing everything, which I think it was handled probably almost perfectly. Early times, it felt like in book 1, it felt sometimes like Katara, because it were more from Aang's perspective, it felt sometimes like Katara was the girl that Aang was trying to like win over, and she felt a little there in those moments. It was like, what do you think, Aang? And it's like, nothing. And she's just like doe-eyed, like not really knowing what he's thinking when she's like, what do you mean I look pretty or something? And it's like looking at it like she doesn't understand in a way to like make Aang, like shit like that happened like once or twice, and I thought that was a little bit ham-fisted, but if you think of the whole picture, I feel like their relationship developed in a non-linear way, where she's liking Haru, or she's liking Jet, or she's this or that, or there's chemistry with Zuko, and Aang is like coming to terms with his intensity of his feelings. Like at first he just thinks she's pretty and likes her pretty much immediately, but then he's talking to the guru, and he's like, I love her. I can't just let her go. And that's like a big moment where he like admits that. And and he like, puts himself in danger. He like leaves before his training's done because he doesn't want to let her go. And then he ends up getting hurt and shit. And like and then he goes off and they have fights, like they have scraps every once in a while. Before that, and then he like kisses her, says nothing, goes off into battle, and it's like super freaking badass. But then after, in the recap episode,
and the recap episode, he was being silly. But
my point is it's not just, oh, we achieved romance, it's over. It's like, and I at the time I criticized it because I was like, okay, it feels like they want some drama with this because it's like right before the finale, and then it'll like add an extra height to the finale. I think maybe, but I think, if nothing else, I think that it adds an interesting complication to their romance, and it adds an interesting dimension to it, that it's not just, okay, he wants her and then he does good things and then eventually he gets her type thing. But he also, there is kind of that thing of she's something to be won, but it's more because Katara is more of a character in herself and she's complicated. It's less like it feels less objectifying and more like Aang is really proving himself as a leader, and it makes him more attractive. It feels more realistic like that, because that's what it's like in real life. Is if you're, it's something that you have to be equipped to do, is like, being in a relationship or actually doing that. It's not just about, oh, is she pretty? It's not just about, oh, does she like him? It's about, is he mature enough for a relationship? And part of the show is him maturing. So it all kind of works like that, and I feel like it's a lot better than a lot of shonen-y sort of romances, for sure. If you think of Hinata or Sakura or whatever, that type of thing as a counterpoint, it's like it's way better. It's like it's almost unmatched as far as the romance goes between Katara and Aang, because it's not exactly simple, and there's conflict there, and it
not
goes back
overly
and forth.
Complicated for no reason.
Right. It doesn't.
Drama.
It's not used as an excuse for more drama. Usually, sometimes maybe it adds to things or it adds a different element to something, but it's not like, oh, we don't have anything for the characters to do. Let's have Aang and Katara get in a super fight and then have a bunch of romance drama or some bullshit. They don't really do that, and I feel like that's admirable. But the second half of Luke Valentine's question was back to the finale. Was the solution to Aang's dilemma of killing Ozai satisfying? There's also another question from somebody else. Let me just get that. From Test Lunch. Thoughts on the Lion Turtle, its sudden appearance and role in the finale? What do you think about all that? About the solution to this dilemma where he's an air nomad, he doesn't kill. They're vegetarians. That's built up through the whole story. Then he gets to the end, and then it's kind of like this, oh, yeah, wait, no, it's not just defeat the Fire Lord. If he leaves him alive, it's just going to happen again because he's, an emperor.
I feel like I really like it because I feel like I like it because I think it does kind of contribute to the thing of like, if you kill the Fire Lord, that may like temporarily solve things, but that also just may start a bunch of other stuff as well. And I do like that, as the end to a children's TV show, it's not like kill your enemies is the only way to prevail and have, and win, And, sometimes it's like if you try hard enough to find another way, there can be another way.
Right. Yeah, I feel like it's similar.
But I also like that he doesn't really convince him. Like he has to force
exactly.
him.
Yeah.
It's not just like they just had a nice chat.
Yeah.
And now the Fire Lord is good again. The Fire Lord is not Zuko, and I like that Azula and the Fire Lord are presented. Maybe they're complex, maybe whatever, maybe they're not. But
they still need to be held
bad
accountable.
People, and they need to be held accountable, and they are not going to change. They're not going to change on their own.
At least not on a dime, not just with a conversation.
At least not in an instant. Maybe before they die, they'll have some regrets and maybe they'll come around. But now's not the time to be like, oh, maybe they'll decide to do something different. They clearly are not going to decide to do something different because they've had 1,000 chances. Yeah. And they didn't.
Yeah, I feel like the stories are different in other ways, but like you said, it's not just a conversation. It's not like a talk no jutsu against pain type thing, which a lot of people criticize. I give a lot of praise to it. Yeah, it's different stories, but the point is like you expected, say, like going back to Naruto, when Naruto, they have the big fight and like Naruto freaks the fuck out and goes basically Avatar state as a type of thing, and then the fight ends, and then Naruto is like gonna go confront him where he is. Naruto comes in, and you think, okay, is he gonna fight him? Are they gonna talk? What's gonna happen here? And then they just talk the whole time, and then a lot of people are like, what the fuck? What, he just changed his mind? It's like, the point of it is not like, oh, it should, like, at this point he's just gonna change his mind. It's that the show is presenting that there's another answer to what's going on, and that might not be through violence. It requires hope, etc. That's in that show. In this one, it's good in with Ozai and Azula. Yeah, you know, the whole show, it strikes an interesting balance with, like, there are people that, you know, are can't be changed just through words. It's a little bit harsher and more realistic. It's less of an allegory for real life, and it more mirrors real situations like that. Not that in real life there are people like you know, people as bad as they are, even if they're doing heinous, terrible things, they're still people. Like, they just because they're doing fucked up things doesn't mean they don't have other aspects to them most of the time. Even if they're completely psychopathic and sociopathic, there's something beneath the surface because they're human. They're just like us. But in as far as representing that dilemma in Avatar, it's, I think, a bit more interesting if you can't be convinced by words, because at some point, you know, sometimes violence is inevitable, and there's going to be, you know, especially after like a genocide. It's more complicated. I feel like not having the out of being able to just talk him down.
Yeah,
you know,
but also not just murdering. Like, you don't have to
not
murder
just
him,
murdering him,
but you can strip away all of his power and put him in jail.
Well, okay, so this is where we get to the thing, is a lot of people think that the lion turtle, and I was going to talk about this at some point, but I'm glad I saved it for this because it allowed you to think about it without the sort of greater conversation around Avatar. But it's a big kind of talking point and debate about whether the lion turtle was satisfying way to do that, because what happens is Aang has this dilemma. He has this really difficult choice to make, and he's basically saved from making it because the lion turtle comes along and gives him a magic power boost that allows him to have his cake and eat it too, basically.
I think, yeah, like, the lion turtle was a cool, like, visual thing, and it was cool, but I do think that a similar thing, like, say Aang just was fighting the Fire Lord, and then in the final moment couldn't do it, but, like, somehow because he was in that state was able to, like, within himself figure out a different way, like, himself, rather than getting told, like, oh, you don't have to kill him. If in the moment he's like, I'm not going to kill him, but I'm going to, like, exact some kind of my powers onto, you know what I mean? Like, if he could have maybe just intuited it from, you know, being in the Avatar state and being, like, so in touch with all of his, you know, if he could have, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like because has all these past lives, because of this and that, I feel like there could have been a way for him to just, like, mentally transcend into the knowledge of that and do it in the heat of the moment, rather than, like, just get told that, you know?
Yeah,
that he doesn't know there's not another option, but he still finds one because he is so dedicated to not, you know.
Yeah, and I feel like the argument against that is just that they didn't, like, what happened, you know, if he found another way. I think that's what people were interested in, was him finding another way, but he didn't have to. He just kind of, like, was given a power, and that, you know, maybe the journey, maybe him trying to figure something out would have been better, but it feels like a Deus Ex Machina because, you know, the theme. But I think the point is, and why I kind of like it and I can forgive it, two reasons. One, the point of it is still there. Him, whether he figured out himself or not, the message comes through with it. So, is it the best thing that the lion turtle showed up a minute before the battle and gave him a superpower that allows him to completely solve the problem? maybe it could have been done better. Maybe there'd be a better way to introduce that. However, second thing, they mentioned the lion turtles and the ancient lion turtle power, not the power of it, but they mentioned the lion turtles like a few times more than I realized on this watch. And there were a few times where I like gave a look to the camera and I'm like, I didn't say anything, but I was just like, what the fuck? They mentioned the lion turtles right now? Like, so, and they mentioned it, I think, in a way that was less like, oh, badger moles, blah, blah, blah. They mentioned it in a way that had like spiritual significance to it, that these were like great spirits or great something. So it seemed to me less like, oh, random combination of animals, like any other random combination of animals we've seen, and more like deep foreshadowing for some kind of a resolution or some sort of big moment with them later. But the point, you can criticize it. I think it's maybe worth it to criticize it, but I still think that overall what they were trying to do with the show came through, and with the point of everything happened and everything, worked with it. So I could pass on that. Let's see if there's any final questions. Okay, I think this is a good final question from Daibo. I'm not going to read the last part of it because I think it is kind of leading. But this is mainly a question for you. In fact, pretty much just a question for you. What are some predictions for the future of the Fire Nation and the rest of the ATLA world? So predictions for Korra.
I don't know. Like, I guess it's hard to predict because I'm not sure like how much of a time skip. I'm not sure like what the state of I'm not sure if it's going to be like everything is fixed and now we're in this new world and now we're going to I'm not sure if it's going to be a Boruto situation where it's like everything is pretty good but now we're just going to mess it up again just for the sake of more plot, or if it's going to be more of a story of, things are never actually perfect in this world and we're always working towards something better, and there's more discoveries to be made and more journeys to be had, and if it's going to be more like I guess yeah, because it's like I can either be like we need to defend what we have, or we need to take back this or that, or it could be like we need to explore this new thing. And I guess I don't know. What I really hope for it is I hope that like the characters are as likable. I hope, because I really like we said, like, the first question of this discussion is just like it's so hard to pick a top 5 because it's like the top 5 is mostly clear, but the top like the next 6, 7, and 8 should be, you want them in the top 5 too. So I really hope, obviously there's Korra, and I hope that we get like a cast of characters that is, as lovable and as unique, and they all have their different roles, and I hope that they don't just feel like, similar to Boruto again, just a Walmart version of the original, I want to see new things. I want to see, potential new bending styles, or just, same bending styles, maybe different techniques that have evolved. Maybe it's more common to use certain things, or maybe, they found new applications. Maybe because everyone kind of came together, maybe there will be more, people, like different benders or different people living in different nations now. Maybe there will be some water benders that have moved into the Earth Kingdom, and now they have this like crazy canal system that is, people are working together in that way. I think that could be cool, and like, finding different innovations for types of bending. I know I love it. I mean, they didn't do this in Naruto, but I always thought it would be good if, like, I love to see the, like, power system of a show be used for day-to-day purposes. Like, I love that so much, and I would like to see some of that in Korra, but I it's hard for me to make predictions because I don't know. Like, the finale of Avatar was so, like, conclusive, but also just left it open for literally anything to happen next, so I don't know. I don't know what's
That's good.
what's gonna happen,
That's
and I like it that way. I don't want to think like, oh, they're gonna do this, that, and the other thing, and it's gonna, I want to be surprised.
I think the only thing that I'll say about all the stuff that you said, I don't want to spoil anything about the world or about applications of bending or all that kind of stuff. But the thing about it being like like a Boruto, since we made a lot of Naruto comparisons, this is a podcast. You don't have to worry about that. There's not really. I don't think there's any characters that are clearly just the younger version or the new version of this or that person. There's a lot of like sort of references, obviously, but there's not like, oh, well, this person is just this person. Clearly, there's similarities, obviously, but it comes more from it feeling like it's in the universe and it feeling like it's a similar type of humor and stuff like that. It feels congruent in the series and, like a sequel, like a continuation. But, you don't get that feeling of just like, okay, they're just trying to recapture what they already did. That's one thing that I think Korra does well, despite, some of the criticisms that it has as a sequel. But it is a sequel. Do you have any? So I have this. I actually, this is something that I've thought about for a while, and it's not a question we got, but it's a question that I have for you, and I have an example. I've always thought about, it comes back to actually one of the questions about like other avatars that you would want to learn about. Do you have any ideas for like a storyline or anything, or a type of avatar that you would really want to see, like just a concept of an avatar, or like what you would really like to see explored? And I'll give mine first. Mine is, I always thought it would be really cool if the avatar was twins. And I don't know if this ever happened, but there was the twins that were the earthbending twins, were one twin, like when I think it was a volcano episode. When the volcano erupted, it was about to like destroy this village, and then they were like, okay, who can blah blah blah, and then one of the kids could earthbend, and then there were twin boys, one of them could earthbend, one of them couldn't. That like went through my mind, and I was like, what if after Korra, the next avatar was twins, one of them could do all the bending, and then one of them had the avatar state.
Whoa.
And one type of bending, or none and just martial arts, but had the avatar state.
I mean, it would even be interesting to have one.
And the avatar state one was the villain, and the one with the bending was the hero, the like new avatar. So they could learn all these things, but they didn't have the knowledge of all the previous avatars, and they didn't have the sort of spiritual guidance that comes with that. But this other avatar that was the villain, I always thought it would be cool if they had this the avatar spirit in them, but they were like a villain and wanted to like tear down society, and then the avatar state would come on and they'd use it, but then they'd like the avatar state would like fight against them basically.
I feel like it would actually like in that kind of thing, it would actually maybe be cooler to have the one that had all of the bending be the villain, because they don't have the guidance from the people inside their head telling them.
It could work either way, but I always thought, but the basic concept is just that there would be twins and the avatar spirit would be split somehow between them. And I think that I feel like twins is used not well enough in media with shit like that, with like mystical powers. I feel like there's a lot of opportunities like that where it's, there's somebody really powerful and then they have a kid and it's just one. It's like always say, like, it's just one Boruto. Why couldn't have Naruto have twins and there'd be like conflict there or something, or two kids and like not just girl who's girl and then Boruto the main character, shit like that.
I don't know if there's anything that I would like. I feel like I'd have to think about that more, because I can't like I feel like almost any, like, you could be like, oh, like this type of person or that type of person, or
I feel like an avatar villain in general is a very interesting concept. Somebody who like is like has the spirit in them that like is supposed to guide everybody towards they're the bridge between the spirit world, but but their idea of doing that is like extremely off the cuff. Like they, I don't know. So, it's like some huge wrong is going on in the world. Rather than trying to save the Fire Nation, they're like a Kyoshi type person who just wants to fucking wipe it off the face of the earth, Something like that. It's a little bit more hardcore, obviously, and doesn't fit with the themes of Avatar, but like in the world, I always thought that was a really cool concept.
Yeah, I don't.
And that's also why I like Kyoshi as she is and what we know about her is because
I mean, like a free Ren type character of like where they just are interested in finding out like all of these like
secrets.
Smaller bending techniques, like goes to the villages and they're just like, oh well, I'm a water bender in like some like random place that's they're not fighting, they're not doing anything with it, so they use it for like this one specific purpose that people wouldn't have thought of, and then they're like collecting all of these different things. I think something like that would be cool.
Yeah,
that would be like what I would pick, like a free Ren kind of thing.
I feel like that kind of a story would work really well in that universe for the same reason that I was saying that like when we went to the moment to moment conversation, how like everything like I feel like that's why it feels like it fits so much is because they both have like similar qualities like that. Yeah. Anyway, I think that's all the questions that a lot of people asked. There wasn't a whole lot of questions this time, but I feel like it took us a while to put up the questions thing, so I think a lot of people didn't see it. Maybe for next, maybe since there's 4 books in Korra, and I feel like Korra. Yeah, actually, I don't want to spoil anything. I feel like we could do a podcast in between each one.
Okay, yeah.
For this one, I feel like that would be a lot better than this case because I feel like we probably would have had really good discussions throughout each book with this one, but we just didn't make time for it, I guess. But yeah, so stay tuned for Korra, everybody. We're so excited to get into it. Sorry this took so long to get out. We really want to get into it. We've been really feeling like we want to watch some Korra. So we hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like and subscribe. Check out Patreon to see uncuts right now. Get ahead. Get to see Korra right now on our Patreon if you're seeing this on YouTube. See you next one. I'm Carson.
I'm Lindsay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.